Am I the asshole? For telling my wife her reaction to a waitress not taking a picture was OTT? I met my sister in commonly visited city a few weekends back. My wife came with me and my two kids 8F and 6M. The restaurant was nice, and she asked the waitress to take all of us a picture and she said that's not part of the job and walked away. I offered to take the picture instead, but she wanted all of us to be in it, so whatever. When the bill came, she snatched that shit and made sure to put 0 tip over the picture. I would HSVE tipped her cash, but my wife would told the waitress to give it back and I didn't want to embarrass her like that. Anyways, when we were driving back to our hotel, I told her that I thought tipping 0 was a bit mean. I mean, me personally, I would have just taken the picture, but I guess in the job description nowhere did it say take pictures for customers. I also said her reaction was a bit over the top. She said that if she didn't want to do stuff like that, working at a tourist city wasn't for her. Before I could say something back, she put in her AirPods and straight up ignored me. Am I the asshole? The only way that I would tell a customer that taking a picture was not part of my job is if I wasn't interested in getting a tip. It's not part of her job, she's spot on. It's also not required to provide a tip, it's at your discretion. Long-time server here and I have been asked literally dozens of times to snap a photo. Is it a pain in the, especially when I'm busy, but suck it up, buttercup. The server was rude as hell and I would have done the same thing as the wife. You're the asshole. I've never had a server refuse to take a photo. At most they can say I'll be right back to do it, or things are really busy right now, but I can do it a little later, etc. Tips aren't mandatory, they're for good service. This server went out of their way to be rude. Why would you give her extra money for being rude to you? You're the asshole. You're the asshole. Your wife didn't make a scene, didn't call out the server, all she did was decide not to tip due to poor service. That's not over the top. The server was unnecessarily rude about a pretty routine and simple customer request. Personally, I'd probably just have tipped less, but that's not the requirement. I am with your wife on this one, to be honest. It takes a person 5 seconds to snap a photo? And thus probably get a nice tip. Instead, the waitress is a snot, she deserved to be stiffed. We are so auto-programmed to tip no matter what that service and demeanor has gone out the window with some serving staff. I do not think you are the a-hole, but neither do I think your wife is out of line. If the waitress was too busy, that's understandable, but she didn't have to be rude about it. I wouldn't have tipped based on the rude answer, not the refusal to take the photo. I'm going to assume your wife was self-aware enough not to ask that of her during a busy meal time. I'm from a Western European country where 2-3 tip on a 50-100 bill is highly appreciated but not required, as the servers make a fair salary, based on hours worked, not on how much their patrons want to hand out. Never a server refused to take a picture. Actually, more often than not, they are the ones asking if we would like them to take a picture if they see us getting ready for it. Not on my job description is something you would say to an AH boss or an R patron, never in response to a polite request. You're the asshole. It isn't hard to not act like an ass and help your customer out with a pic. Unless your wife never tips, listen to her. Tips aren't required, they can reflect the service you get. I've tipped above the standard for above standard service. As a server, I agree that sometimes it's like fuck him so busy, but I always say yes with no attitude. I'm on your wife's side. It was rude. That waitress was really rude and dumb, to be honest. No tip seems good in this instance. Info: can you describe your group's behavior during dinner and how you treated the waitress before that interaction? You're the asshole for not taking her side for such a minor thing she was in the right about. Being in the hospitality industry means you have to be hospitable. It's one of the reasons Americans are so quick to defend service workers due to how nice and hospitable they typically are. The waiter was completely in the right to say no. Your wife was completely in the right to decide not to tip for whatever fucking reason, mind you, based on that. So, yeah, you're the asshole. I have been in the bar business for 40 years. Unless I'm completely swamped, when I see someone trying to do a group photo, I always tell the person taking the photo, if you want to be in the picture, I'll take it for you. Waitress definitely didn't need to be that rude. She isn't obligated to take a picture, but it just takes a few seconds and makes the table happy. There is a much nicer way to say no. I have never seen a waitress being this rude without some kind of prior incident. I think we are missing a part of the story. Tips aren't mandatory. You want a tip, you be hospitable, that's the job. It's not the waitstaff's job to take photos. But it's also not your job to pay them a living wage, that's the restaurant's job. When everyone is having a good experience, we can ignore the second truth and leave a tip. But when the wait staff is willfully shattering that illusion, they get to be the ones missing out. Your wife is not an AH. You're the asshole for not backing her up and throwing money away. You're the asshole. Your wife didn't make a scene, didn't call out the server, all she did was decide not to tip due to poor service. That's not over the top. The server was unnecessarily rude about a pretty routine and simple customer request. Personally, I'd probably just have tipped less, but that's not the requirement. You're the asshole. Most every job I've worked has been customer service based or childcare. In the hospitality world, that waitress is in the wrong for not just fulfilling the very easy request, be apologizing that she can't do it, but asking a coworker to see, saying no in a much kinder way. In the childcare world, that waitress is in the wrong for not playing nice. You owe your wife an apology. She has a perfectly reasonable stance on this, and she's justified in feeling offended by the waitress and let down by you. Not gonna judge you, but I will give my 2 cents on the matter. Your wife isn't wrong if she doesn't want to tip a rude waitress. I personally would take a photo of a family enjoying the food or just making memories, even if it's not in my job description. Being rude has consequences. For context, how did your wife frame the question, and how busy was it? Honestly, if a server refused to take a photo, I'd leave no tip too. I can see your side and your wife's TBH. That waitress was incredibly rude. Even if she didn't want to take the picture, it was the way she said no that made her the asshole. As someone who waited tables for literal years, I wouldn't expect a tip if I talked to a customer like that. Waitress was super rude and basically asking for no reduced tip. Who the hell declines to take a picture when asked? And to say that's not part of the job is flawed thinking. Her job is literally to make sure her guests enjoy their night out. So the real AH here is the waitress. But in this scenario, you're a close second for that title. Is it not part of the job? Yes. However, don't expect a tip if you want to be like that. Takes a minute to take a picture, won't hurt you and won't kill you. Downvote me if you want, but that waitress was unnecessarily rude. You work hospitality, have a better attitude, get a better tip. I wouldn't tip if I was in her place. I always tip, and I wouldn't tip if I had that experience. I pay for the food. I tip for the hospitality, and the waitress wasn't hospitable. It's weird you're so defensive over the waitress over someone who was rude to your wife. You're the asshole. I'm with your wife here, and to make sure I wasn't being biased, I read your post to my boyfriend, and he also agrees with your wife. It take 5 seconds to take a photo for your customer. I take photos for total strangers. Hen, I'm running late, just help them make the damn memory. I agree with your wife. As a server myself, it takes 10 seconds to snap a couple of photos, and people ask me to do it all the time. I actually like it when people ask because it indicates they are enjoying the place and want to have a great time. This server, from the sound of it, just doesn't want to work hard. Well, unfortunately, when your pay is tip-based, you kind of have to hustle. I guess it's not for everyone. For waitress being over the top rude, getting a 0 tip might be a valuable tip indeed, that she needs an attitude adjustment or a career change.